Please remember to like and subscribe for more fanfics. Enjoy.
Coil, by Allegory for Hatred. This is Book 2 of Magic Amp. Mystery. All rights go to Allegory for Hatred. I do not own this story. 7 Hell's Hounds. Dazai's weekly letter to Mori had been a little light on detail. It wasn't for lack of trying. After all, Dazai always tried to flesh out his mission reports to a satisfactory level. Anything less, and Mori started to worry he was falling into a depressive episode. But between arriving at Hogwarts and now, he hadn't made any headway on Lucius's test. Discounting everything with Lockhart and the Sensing Stone, Dazai had a relatively quiet week. Still, Dazai wrote out his letter and shipped it off on Featherbrain's wings. Mori would just have to deal. Mori would also have to deal with Featherbrain tearing a hole in Mori's nice new doctor's coat, Dazai's special orders for the owl just before she took off. With that done, Dazai now waited in one of the many halls of Hogwarts. A large empty wall stood at his back. Sometimes he knew a tapestry to hang there. Other times, there was a door, the club room, or it was the gang office now. He couldn't get in. In the past, Dazai and the Loyalty Club would meet here for lessons, but whatever magic made the room appear didn't agree with Dazai. He would have to wait for someone else to come along before the empty wall split open into a door. It was a hassle, but Dazai was honestly just pleased to have found his way there by himself for once. Dazai stood perfectly still, only looking up intermittently when someone passed by. He didn't recognize anyone's face, but they all seemed to recognize him. It put a pit in Dazai's stomach. There had to be some way to mollify the masses, a way to ingratiate himself to them somehow. At the very least, then Dazai could walk around the school without garnering so much attention. But between Lockhart and the Daily Prophet, Dazai had a lot of bad press to work against. He considered, briefly, explaining the truth about Quirrell to the other students, but eventually decided against it. At this point, he doubted bringing up Voldemort by name would do much in his favor. But there had to be something. The twins would probably have a good idea. Deep in thought, Dazai didn't notice someone walking right up to him without any hint of hesitation. "Why are you standing by this wall all alone?" Dazai snapped back to attention, shoulders tensing defensively on instinct. The person standing in front of him was quite a bit shorter than him. She had long pale hair with eyes silver and piercing. The blue of her tie told Dazai she was Ravenclaw. Something about her expression gave Dazai the impression that she was seeing straight through him. "I'm contemplating bashing my head against the wall," Dazai told her for lack of a better answer. He could hardly tell this random girl he was waiting to enter his gang's office. "Is there something interesting on the other end?" she asked, evidently ignoring Dazai's remark entirely. "I read in the Quibbler article things you didn't know about Hogwarts, that the school is full of secret rooms and passageways." It was number 7. He looked at the girl, then to the other students in the hall. Nothing had changed. Everyone was still keeping a fearful distance from him. Yet, this girl had boldly walked up to him and started a conversation. "What are you doing?" he asked instead. "Asking a question," she said in a voice that seemed to be flowing like sand. It fell through the air and slipped between her fingers, shapelessly. Dazai raised a brow. Was this girl totally right in the head? Her eyes were intense but didn't seem to be focused on anything at all. I mean, Dazai titled his chin towards where a gaggle of first years were staring at them, horrified. "What are you doing talking to me? Your friends think I'm going to attack you. Are you?" "Sa hadn't been planning on it," Dazai replied, a little dumbfounded. Either this girl had no idea who he was, or she was dead set on alienating herself. "Those aren't my friends anyway. They're always calling me Loony Lovegood, since they think I'm a bit odd." She paused. "My name is Luna Lovegood. Did I mention? It's Luna Lovegood, not Loony Lovegood," she emphasized. "Only Ginny Weasley doesn't call me that, but she's wandered off to somewhere again. I was just checking the Gryffindor common room, but she wasn't there. Do you think she's picked up a Rackspurt infestation?" Dazai had no idea what a Rackspurt was. "Oh, have you got them too? Earlier there was a look on your face like you weren't entirely here. Thinking happy thoughts will dispel the Rackspurts. That's what the Quibbler says in issue 76, 4th article, 3rd paragraph. 10 Do I know you?" Dazai cut in abruptly. Luna blinked. "No, although I've read all about you. Everyone has read about me. Yes, but everyone is reading the Daily Prophet. That pansy Parkinson, especially. Did you know she stopped by the Ravenclaw common rooms the other day just to talk bad about you? It was quite worrying stuff. Perhaps you should try to make nice with her before she incites a rebellion. She paused. I tried convincing my housemates to read the Quibbler for information on you instead. If you want a reliable article, then you need to be reading the Quibbler. I've been subscribed for years now. Dazai perked up, interest at once piqued. He'd never heard of the Quibbler before Luna popped up and started name-dropping it left and right. But if it was reporting different events than the Daily Prophet, if the Quibbler is so reliable, why have I never heard of it? He asked, already wondering how he could get his hands on a copy. Something imperceptible in Luna's expression hardened. Just because something isn't popular doesn't mean it isn't true. Just as quick as the emotion came on, that strangely stern expression on Luna's face vanished. It was replaced once again by a dreamy, almost serene look. Dazai mentally clocked the reaction, wondering what history lied behind those words. If anyone knows that, he said, words carefully chosen. It's me. I suppose that's true. But the Quibbler tells the truth, huh? Dazai scratched his chin, feigning thoughtfulness. What does it have to say about me? Well, she brought a finger to her lips and thought, for one, I don't believe you really are a demon. If you were, then I'd be able to see your horns. She got up on her tippy toes to peer over top his head. I don't see any. And your hair is quite short. Did you get a snip recently? Luna, he chided. This girl sure could ramble. According to the Quibbler, Mr. Quirrell went on sabbatical and came back possessed by an Albanian spirit. You aren't a demon, you're an exorcist. She hummed, ignoring the way Dazai's brow rose higher and higher the more she spoke. An Ravenclaw house ghost told me that all the ghosts avoid you, so it must be true. Even Peeves avoids you. Just yesterday he spilled tomato soup all over my robes. If I were an exorcist too, I wouldn't have had to scrub them so thoroughly. Ginny helped me though, so it's all right. Only she doesn't read the Quibbler and says you aren't any sort of exorcist. An exorcist? Well, it was better than demon. Maybe Dazai had it right in the first place, and Luna Lovegood wasn't the most grounded person in the world. But there was something that held him in place. For the first time since starting his second year, a stranger wasn't looking at him with fear or trepidation. Instead, Luna looked at him with eyes that didn't seem to be seeing at all, as if she was talking to just some other nobody in the halls. It was refreshing, and a little interesting, if Dazai was being fair. It was enough to keep him from just walking away without another word, at least. More than that, however, was this Quibbler paper. Hearing Luna now only confirmed it for Dazai. The controversy of his fight with Quirrell stemmed with the Daily Prophet alone. Whatever was going on behind the scenes, it started there. Do you have any copies of the Quibbler? Dazai asked suddenly. Luna immediately perked up, an excited smile lighting her face. I have every copy. My dad is the editor for the Quibbler. I'm sure he'll be very pleased to learn he has a new reader. Her dad? Well, that explained Luna's enthusiasm over the topic. Although Dazai couldn't even imagine himself being a fan of his own father's work, or Mori's, at that. Though Port Mafia work tended to be bloody, unlike the rather plain world of tabloid journalism. Perhaps that was the real difference here. Could I have a copy? Any one of the articles about me. She smiled. Of course. Perhaps something in the Quibbler could give Dazai an idea of what was going on. Somewhere between Quirrell and Rita Skeeter, the story had gotten entirely out of hand. Even if this Quibbler seemed to mostly be nonsense, it was still closer to the truth than the Daily Prophet. Oh? Who is this? A friend or a foe? Dazai and Luna both looked up, coming face to face with the impish grins of the Weasley twins. Dazai cast a quick glance to Luna. Friend, he said after a second. Beside him, Luna's expression fell into stark surprise. She obviously hadn't expected to be called friend so casually. If anything about that loony story was to be believed, he doubted she had many friends to begin with. This is Luna. We just met, and she doesn't think I'm a serial killer. Isn't that exciting? I'm friends with an exorcist, Luna hummed, surprise giving way to a bubbly sort of smile. How lovely. Fred and George smirked, laughter on their lips. You're an exorcist now, Snakey? Dazai wiggled his fingers at them. They snorted. To Weasley twins, Luna said suddenly, drawing everyone's attention back to her. Bluntly, she said, I seen you around. Ginny says awful things about you. George laughed. Oh, what's our little sis telling everyone about us? That you're pranksters with a mean streak. She says you take things too far sometimes, and that you're maybe planning some kind of mutiny against the professors. She hummed. Is it true that you told Ginny she'd have to live in the woods if she missed the boats? Just a little prank. Harmless fun. Is it? Once again, that strangely serious look crossed her face. And just like last time, it was gone within a fraction of a second. Luna didn't pay the twins' perplexed expressions any mind. Instead, she asked out of the blue, Are you three planning a prank like that right now? Fred and George blinked. No? Dazai met Luna's eyes, shrugging. It could be a problem if Luna spilled the beans about his gang's secret meeting spot. Thinking this, he offered her a small smile. The prying curiosity in Luna's eyes immediately shifted, replaced instead by something warm and friendly. No need to worry. I won't tell anyone that the three of you are up to some mysterious mischief behind this wall. Luna's smile was pleasantly empty. She turned to Dazai. And sure, my dad would love to interview you for one of his articles. Let me know if you'd be interested. Then, without even a word of goodbye, Luna turned on her heel and left. Dazai and the twins watched her go, befuddled. She seemed nice? And a little strange, Fred said with a puff. You told her about the secret room here, boss? Dazai shook his head. So she was just guessing, actually. Evidently, it's common knowledge in the Quibbler. The Quibbler? The twins sounded surprised. And you read that nonsense? Luna's father writes it, he corrected, then shrugged his shoulders. Then, pivoting, he asked, Did you happen to notice if Ron and Hermione were on their way here? Think they're around here somewhere, George said, glancing around. Dazai also took a moment to scan the hallway. At some point, that group of first years seemed to have left. Evidently, the only thing holding their attention had been the possibility of him attacking Luna. Now, it was only Dazai and the Weasley twins. He turned away from the empty hall. Well, they can catch up later. How does this thing open again? Dazai wrapped a knuckle over the brick wall. Magic hummed beneath his glove, but it was unwilling to budge for Dazai. No luck, boss? Fred snorted. Won't you just have to, George narrowed his eyes at the wall and waved his arms around, as if feigning an elaborate spell. Point it really hard. At least, that's what Blaze said when he showed us last year. Despite the blasé nature of George's instruction, Dazai watched as, after a second, the bricks shifted. They slowly morphed into a familiar stone door. The twins gave the hallway a final, cursory glance before swinging the door open. They helped themselves inside. Dazai followed a step behind, kicking the door closed with his heel as he did so. The clubroom looked almost exactly like Dazai remembered it. Stone floors lined the entire massive room, and a colorful stained glass window lit up the back wall. The mahogany desk and sofa were also exactly where he remembered them to be. A cozy-looking blanket was draped over the couch. Also familiar was the sting of magic on his skin upon entering. The entire room seemed to be made of magic. Naturally, no longer human needed to make its upset of this known. However, there seemed to be a few new additions to the room as well. A new lamp by the desk cast a golden glow over the whole space, illuminating the room with flickering firelight. There was an odd iron smell in the room. Dazai's nose scrunched up as he searched around for the source. A dozen potted plants lined the walls. A few other new things had filled out the room as well. A chalkboard, an empty bookcase, a mountainous nest of pillows and blankets. Dazai abruptly stopped his exploration of the room. A nest. A furrow in his brow, Dazai sneaked across the room towards the pillows. Well, this is new, Fred commented from somewhere behind him. I don't remember wanting a fancy lamp like this. Dazai took another step closer to the pillows. It was hard to focus on with the magic swarming everywhere in the room, but Dazai thought he could almost make out a distinct magical signature hiding within the nest. It felt warm, faintly smoky in his lungs. Or this... George paused. A pile of suspicious raw meats. A fire lamp, a nest, and raw meat. A magical signature like ember and ash. Oh. Dazai knew what this was. Just as soon as the realization set in, however, so too did tension snap his entire body ramrod straight. They weren't alone in the clubroom. An old enemy of Dazai's was hiding amongst them. A scaly black head poked out from the nest of pillows. She was a lot bigger now, head alone the size of a watermelon, but Dazai recognized the creature immediately. "Egg isn't still feral, is she?" he asked aloud. Tentatively, Dazai took a step back, accidentally bumping into one of the twins. Fred glanced down at him. Following Dazai's gaze, Fred's joking smile immediately flickered out. The Norwegian ridgeback dragon slowly rose from out of its nest, blankets slipping from its form and falling into a pile on the floor. Its body rose and rose and rose. Dazai's eyes widened as he took in the sheer size of Egg now. She must have at least quadrupled in size since he'd last seen her. Egg's claws clacked against the stone floor. Her wings stretched out, twitching and pulling the thin, dark skin out unnaturally. Fire-orange eyes blinked one at a time. The dragon took a step toward them. Dazai felt his breath catch in his throat as a low growl slipped from Egg's snarling maw. Going stiff, Fred grabbed Dazai's shoulders and pulled him away. Fred whispered. "I'm going to guess, still feral." Dazai's fingers twitched at his side, no longer human poised to defend. Egg took another menacing step, wings outstretched and large. "Are you harassing my dragon?" Like flipping a switch, all the tension in the room vanished. Egg made a strangely cooing noise before plopping down on her hindquarters. Her wings pulled back into her sides and her claws tucked under her stomach. Dazai hesitated for a second longer before whirling on whoever had spoken. Draco raised an unamused brow. "Good afternoon, Draco," Dazai called. "This dragon is trying to kill us." "She's just saying hello. Aren't you, Egg?" Dazai blinked. He gave the room another quick once over only once he was sure Egg was staying put. "And you've just been keeping her in the clubroom? Where else am I meant to keep your illegal pet, Dazai?" "She's illegal." Dazai rubbed the back of his neck. "You said illegal twice." Draco shot him a glare. Then he walked straight past Dazai and the twins to give Egg a gentle pat on the snout. Dazai watched with wide eyes as the dragon stayed perfectly still. She didn't prepare to attack or growl threateningly. Instead, she made a pleased-sounding squeak and butted her head into Draco's leg. "You tamed her," George piped up, interest sparkling in his eyes. "Impressive. You did tame her, right?" Dazai asked before Draco could respond. "I'd rather not have to fend off a dragon for a second time. She's definitely old enough to be breathing fire now, too. And burning to death is not on my list of best ways to commit suicide." "You're what?" Fred and George whirled on him. Draco gave Egg a hearty scratch on the chin. She practically melted into the touch. "She looks tame to me," Blaze said from the doorway. He walked up to Dazai's side, giving his friend a quick once-over. "And at the very least, she's a far cry from when she first hatched." She was also bigger, which didn't do much for her looking non-threatening. But Blaze was right. When Egg first hatched, she was a little spitfire of a thing, all claws and fangs. Blaze had been hurt then. Blood on his cloak, Dazai pushed that memory aside. "How did you tame her?" he asked. All his research on the subject said that Norwegian ridgebacks, females especially, were violent beasts. Draco finally looked up from Egg, hands falling to his sides. Even wild animals respect the Malfoy name Dazai. At the row of blank expressions staring back at him, he added, "My father keeps all sorts of ancient books in the library. After I came home with a dragon last year, he gave me a book on them." "Someone say book?" Dazai turned upon recognizing Hermione's voice. He waved first to her, then to Ron once he noticed the red head at her back. Draco's lip pulled downward. For a second, Dazai thought he might snap at the Gryffindors, but after a moment, all he said was, "Written by the Merlin." The great wizard Merlin was a dragon lord, so of course he would know how to tame a dragon. "The Malfoy charm helped as well, I'm sure," Blaze commented idly. His eyes fell briefly to Egg, who had since returned to her nest. "Naturally." With that settled, Dazai finally crossed the room to the desk. He dragged his fingers through a thin layer of dust. Everyone was finally gathered all together. Fred and George, Draco, Blaze, Hermione, and Ron, Dazai's own little Hogwarts gang. With the addition of Egg, they even had a sort of mascot. Something about seeing them all together like this bloomed warm pride in Dazai's chest. Not only had these people come to trust him, but Dazai felt that he could really trust them in return. Dazai ignored the reflexive voice in his head sounding like Mori's. "You're too fond of them, Shuji." Mostly. He could mostly trust them. He clapped. The noise startled away Dazai's unwanted thoughts and drew the gang's eyes straight to him. "Thanks everyone for coming when called." "Why is he talking about us like we're his dogs again?" Ron stage whispered to Hermione. She shook her head. "Last year we all did fantastic work of stealing the Philosopher's Stone." Dazai looked from one person to the next as he spoke. Fred and George were smiling, still clearly pleased with how the heist had gone. Hermione and Ron shared a brief exasperated glance. It wasn't lacking in fondness, Dazai noted warmly. True to character, Blaise merely nodded in passive agreement. Only Draco wore a serious expression on his face, but given everything between the Port Mafia and the Malfoys, that made sense. Moving on, Dazai continued to address the group. "And I want to do something big this year too. Something less likely to end in the magical community demonizing me, if possible." I liked the idea of stealing test answer keys. He glanced to the twins, noting how they eagerly bounced on their feet. "And I'm open to suggestions." "That's cheating," Hermione cut in immediately. "It's business," Dazai corrected with a cheeky grin. "As long as we charge for it," Hermione squeaked. "That's still cheating." "Wait, we're making money on this?" Ron perked up. Dazai shrugged. "It's more exciting like that." "Boring," Draco drawled. He crossed his arms. "Some of us don't need to pawn off test answers to make do. If you need money, Dazai, I'm sure my father can loan you some." As one, the Weasleys went stiff and glared down Draco. Dazai understood why. The Weasley family didn't have much in the way of expendable money. They wore hand-me-down clothes and shared books between them, whereas Dazai and Draco seemingly had unlimited financial backing. Ron and the twins didn't have such a luxury. It was clearly a spot of contention between them. Dazai frowned. No fighting. He blinked, suddenly realizing, looking around now, it became very clear to Dazai how his gang was arranged, the Gryffindors on one side and the Slytherins on the other. The only outlier was Dazai himself, standing smack dab in the middle. Upon noticing the distance, Dazai sighed. "Don't tell me you six have just been bickering with each other the entire time I was away." "We're not fighting, per se," the twins said. The anger in their eyes vanished the second they turned to Dazai. They sounded hesitant, apologetic, and "we haven't been fighting this whole time. It's more." Dazai raised a brow. "What?" The gang shared guilty looks, save for Draco, who stuck his chin in the air and avoided everyone's eyes. Hermione patted down her robes. "To be honest, the gang didn't meet up at all after you left last year, Dazai." Ron nodded, rubbing the back of his neck sheepishly. "Yeah," Fred agreed. "I mean, Blaise showed us to this room, but then we all kind of stopped talking to each other." "You're the glue holding us all together, boss." Dazai blinked, taking in everyone's appearances again. Draco and Blaise off to one side, Ron, Hermione, and the twins off to the other. Upon entering, no one had spoken to anyone outside of their house, barring a few sparse words from Draco to Hermione. They barely looked at one another. Even in Diagon Alley, Draco and the twins hadn't interacted like friends might. The gang was falling apart before it was even built together. Dazai had told Mori his gang was strong, that his gang was a resource. Apparently, it had been a lie. Dazai had been born into the Mafia under the current boss. By extension, he was born to lead. If he couldn't get this group of idiots to work together, then he wasn't fit to be alive. Something tangled in his chest. "That won't do," Dazai said, propping his hands on his hips. "How are we meant to do anything nefarious if none of you will even look at each other?" Nefarious? Hermione stumbled. "Before we move on to anything exciting, we need..." He hummed in thought. "Oh," Dazai blinked. "We need team-building exercises." In the Mafia, people just got along. If you couldn't put up and work as a team, one or all of you would die. Dazai was forgetting again that people at Hogwarts were soft. House loyalty was as divisive as things got around here. Discounting Quirrell, mortal peril never really factored in. Fred and George immediately burst out laughing. Meanwhile, Draco's disapproving condescension had dropped into shock. "You can't be serious," Draco spat. "I'm not working with blood traders and a mudblood. I'm here because of you and Blaze." Dazai's eyes narrowed, but he didn't comment except to raise a brow. "Last year," he said, stepping closer to Draco. They locked eyes. "When you had me do a show of loyalty." "It's kind of the same thing, isn't it? Only now it's a show of camaraderie." "Dazai," Draco huffed. "That's not at all the same situation, and you know it." He shrugged. Blaze cleared his throat. "What did you have in mind, boss?" I hadn't thought about it." Dazai kicked the ground. Unconsciously, his eyes slipped back to Egg. The dragon yawned before curling up in a heap. He hummed. "How about this? Draco can teach Ron how to care for Egg. Then you can take turns caring for her throughout the year. That would be a good start." "What?" "Absolutely not." Dazai waved him off. "Don't yell, it's giving me a headache." Ron shook his head wide-eyed. "That snake'll have Eggy corrupted against me. I'll be dragon food by the end of the week. No way am I going anywhere near Draco. As if I would let you taint Egg with your soiled blood traitor hands." Clicking his tongue, Dazai mentally rolled his eyes. These two hadn't changed at all. The only time Dazai had ever seen Draco and Ron get along had been last year in the Owlery. "Draco wouldn't have you killed unless I asked him to," he smiled pleasantly. Draco didn't comment. Ron squawked. "Draco, it's more practical to share responsibly over Egg's care. I can't do it." He waved a gloved hand around in point, and I technically told Ron he could keep her. He beamed, giving them a saccharin. "And try not to kill each other, okay? Dazai, if you all behave, then I can finally give out my joining gifts." Dazai drew a whine into his voice. "But you're all so disobedient, it's like we're barely even a gang anymore." Fred and George immediately snapped upright. They shared a frantic look. "Boss isn't going to give us our gifts? Quick, Ronikins. Give your good pal Draco a hug." The twins unceremoniously grabbed Ron's shoulders and pushed him towards Draco. Ron squirmed and kicked in their hold. "He is not my friend." "For us, please?" "For the joining gift, Ronnie," Fred pleaded. "Don't you want a gift from Dazai?" Ron finally weaseled out of their grasps. He sounded out of breath, but thoughtfulness had taken over the prior disgust. He shot an almost too quick-to-catch look in Draco's direction. "So I guess," he grumbled. "Well, I already have my joining gift from Blaze," Draco puffed up. In example, he lifted up the skirt of his robes. Wrapped around his leg was an elaborate-looking wand holster. It looked to be made of high-quality black leather. A silver dragon was embroidered on the side. Draco dropped his robes after giving the room only a second to admire its craftsmanship. "But I suppose, if you beg me for it, I'll teach you about dragons." Dazai watched as Ron held an inner war with himself. The twins, too, seemed to be eagerly awaiting Ron's response. Surprisingly, it was Hermione who put an end to things. "Oh, that's enough, you two." She shook her head, curls bouncing. "Quit bickering already. In the time it takes for you two to stop arguing, I could read Merlin's dragon book 10 times over." Dazai beamed. "Great. Hermione will learn how to take care of Egg too then." "Huh?" She jumped. I wasn't volunteering, Dazai." "But you'd make such a good chaperone." He grinned. "Reading and reminding people to behave. It sounds like something you'd enjoy." "Well," she trailed off, unable to really disagree. "Wait, what about those two?" Ron asked, shoving his thumb out in the direction of the twins. "And Blaze? What are you forcing them to do?" "Well, they're actually very well behaved already. And stop talking about us like we're dogs you haven't trained yet." Dazai cleared his throat, pivoting quickly to another topic. "They'll be helping the gang out with some other stuff. You kids can work on this dragon thing until you've learned to behave yourselves. After that, you can join us with the big-time schemes." Fred choked on a laugh. George helpfully smacked him on the back. "Oh, you're the same age as us," Draco intoned. "In the meantime," Dazai said, turning to the twins rather than gracing Draco with a response. He sifted around his robes for a second. "Something for you two?" Fred and George bounced excitedly in place. They shared matching grins and held out their hands expectantly. Ooh, what'll it be? Dazai dropped a small metal object into each of their waiting palms. The twins oohed. Fred held his up to see it better. A small, red gem caught the light. A cufflink? He asked, surprise in his voice. Yeah, but these look really expensive. George quickly looked from his gift to Fred's. The cufflinks were, in fact, excessively expensive. Not that Dazai's wallet was any lighter for it. Back in Yokohama, Mori was probably mourning the loss of his fanciest cufflinks, an unknowing benefactor to Dazai's gang. Each cufflink was about 1 inch wide and was made of a clean-looking metal. In the center of each cufflink, an authentic red ruby was affixed. A quick glance earlier in the school year told Dazai that they were pigeon bloods. Very expensive. You could buy a house with them, he said. Then Dazai explained with a wink. When they're a set, so don't separate them. For a second, he thought Fred and George might have short-circuited. But after a second, the Weasley twins rushed to pin the cufflinks in place. On George's right sleeve and Fred's left, a shiny new joining gift reflected firelight. They gave each other a once-over. My dear Fred, your cufflink looks stunning. Wherever did you buy it? Oh, this little thing? Fred waved his arm out. At the fancy store for rich snobs. I have an in with the boss. At once they dissolved into laughter, though Dazai noted with some amusement that their wild gesticulations had died down some. Instead, both Fred and George seemed to be trying to move very carefully, lest a cufflink come loose. Annoyance flickered across Draco's face as he eyed their mocking hysterics. Socialites don't talk like that. Socialites, the twins echoed. They only laughed harder. Rolling his eyes, Dazai tried not to let the fondness show too obviously on his face. The twins were still laughing, only pausing briefly to admire their gifts. Dazai decided they could have a moment to themselves. He looked at the others. Aren't you jealous? He hummed. Hurry up and become friends so I can bequeath expensive gifts onto you. Ron glanced to Draco with an expression like he might be sick, but instead of spitting out something unkind again, he sucked in a huge breath. Fine. Fine. Ron nodded, but only for the gift. I wouldn't hang out with a Malfoy if it weren't for the gift and egg, since she's actually my dragon. Draco's head snapped to face the redhead. Your dragon? Dazai gave her to me first, and when you couldn't take care of her, Dazai gave her to me. Okay, that's going well, Dazai commented with a hum. Good luck to you all, but mostly Hermione for having to put up with everything. Hermione let out a world-weary sigh. Speaking of, he said to her, there's some research I need to do. You're welcome to tag along once these two don't need supervision any longer. She perked up. I can help now. You know I can always make time for research. Dazai shook his head, turning away when her frown looked hurt. One thing at a time. It's nothing time-sensitive, I think. Hermione was obviously very curious, if her wide, asking eyes were anything to go by. But Dazai didn't relent. His gang was of no use to him if it could barely function as a unit. It was more important to get that sorted out first. Moreover, Ron and Draco kept shooting one another scathing glares. Dazai picked at the skin of his wrist. In the meantime, he needed to give them something to focus on. In the Mafia, one of the main things aside from the threat of death that limited infighting was the fact that everyone shared a common goal. Things were shakier now with Father so ill, but no, Dazai wouldn't make the same brainless mistakes as that man. So, he turned to Fred and George. And you two already have any plans in mind for this test-answer-stealing scam? They perked up immediately. A shared goal. He could give them that. The gang continued to chat for nearly an hour after that. Dazai and the twins plotted out potential heist ideas, which professors to target, what distractions would work best, how they would attract customers. After a while, the others jumped in to offer up ideas as well. At one point, Ron piped up, let's charge a galleon from each student we sell to. Draco promptly argued, only a galleon? It would be more economic to charge something. Like, a sickle per question. All things considered, it was a surprisingly tame exchange between the two. Dazai's gang was coming together already. We'd make a killing on longer tests, Dazai hummed. That's a good idea. Golden started Draco. Don't patronize me. Talking it out like this helped not only to bring everyone in the gang closer together, it also fleshed the scheme out a lot. By the end of the hour, everyone in the group had an objective to be working towards. Draco and Ron would be learning to not scream at each other, with Hermione supervising. The twins would be preparing for a heist. Blaise would be sniffing out viable customers. And lastly, wait, what are you doing in this whole operation? Ron had a brow raised, and an expression somehow both amused and annoyed on his face. I'm delegating. Dazai leaned away from the blackboard, where he'd been writing out everyone's assignments like he were a teacher, and the others his students. I'm keeping everyone on track, preparing for every inevitable detour, and taking the fall if we get caught. Basically, I'm keeping the trouble to a minimum, and cleaning up whatever messes you kids get into. Hermione paled at the threat of trouble. Pontieu, of all people, don't need any more bad press, Blaise said. Dazai waved him off. I'm a demon, remember? The staff will probably blame me even if Ron were holding up a giant flashing sign that says I did it. Why me? Anyway, Dazai said, son, I don't mind. In a way, it makes things easier. Blaise gave him an unimpressed look. With that settled, Dazai opened his mouth to dismiss the gang. Before he could, however, the twins suddenly asked, Hey, if Dazai is a demon, what does that make us? Everyone's eyes turned to the twins. They wore looks of deep concentration between their brows. Dazai noticed immediately how they seemed to be mouthing the word demon silently to themselves, as though testing it out. Dazai paused. What? Draco crossed his arms. What are you two talking about now? Fred hesitated for only a second, eyes flashing to the Malfoy quickly. Then, he grinned. Good question, Mr. Dragon Tamer. We were only thinking, George continued, if our boss is a demon, at least according to everyone who reads the Daily Prophet, does that make us all demons too? Or are we more like his demonic underlings? Dazai grimaced. He had enough trouble with the title demon as it was. Surely everyone else here didn't want to carry that weight around as well? We aren't Dazai's underlings, Ron huffed. You know what he really thinks of us? We're his dogs, Blaise hummed. He brought a considering hand to stroke his chin. Ah, were you two trying? To come up with a name for the gang? They nodded emphatically. Dazai himself perked up a little at the idea. He hadn't really considered naming his gang, instead seeing it as something they would tackle down the line. But now that they were working towards more concrete objectives, maybe it was time to start, for a lack of a better word, branding. The twins bounced excitedly. Dazai's demons. Dazai's dogs. Stop bringing my name into it. Dazai immediately shot them down. If you go around saying my name like that, it'll only be a few hours before we get caught. The twins paused, briefly looked to one another, before smashing their two suggestions into one. And demon dogs. The name hung in the air for a second, nearly, but not quite, taking root in Dazai's head. It was certainly a menacing name for a gang, something that inspired fear and obedience. The word demon still struck him, though. A moment longer passed then. Hellhounds, Dazai said. We'll be the Hellhounds. He wrote it in bold chalk letters across the top of the blackboard. Hellhounds, then he paused. Well, you're the Hellhounds. I'm just hell, Ron supplied unhelpfully. Instead of pulling a face, like Ron probably expected, Dazai beamed. You're right. It's more like Hell's Hounds then, isn't it? With an apostrophe. In the small space between the word hell and hounds, Dazai drew in a tiny s. He had to write it crooked to make it fit. Hell's Hounds, it read proudly. Hell's Hounds Gang. Hermione tasted the name on her tongue. It's a bit dark, though, and has a nice ring to it. The twins cheered. Hell's Hounds! Hell's Hounds. Dazai could agree it had a certain charm to it. A little threatening, a little rebellious. Just the right name for a mafioso's gang of schoolchildren. If there are no complaints, here, Dazai paused. No one made any word of argument. Then it's settled. Welcome to Hell's Hounds, everyone. Fred and George whooped. Hermione and Ron clearly looked hesitant, but Dazai saw them give one another quiet, private smiles. Even Blaise managed to pull a grin into his usually dull expression. And Draco, Dazai's smile stilled. Draco was still standing alone, his own lonely little portion of the gang's office. But unlike the others, he was not smiling. Instead, Dazai realized, his body was lined with tension. He was good at masking emotions behind a glaring mask, but Dazai could read through it. Draco looked to be deep in thought. Based on the line of his shoulders, it wasn't a good one. It was time the two of them had a talk. If anyone at Hogwarts were to ask, Draco did not take commands. He was a Malfoy, kin of the strongest wizarding family in history, inheritor of countless wealths, and son of the ever-cunning Lucius Malfoy. Draco commanded others. If he said, "To my homework," common folk begged at his feet to do it. When he said, "Unleave the common room," so he could have a private chat with someone, they booked it out of there at double speed. At Hogwarts, he was head of the pack, king of the crowd, and ruler of everything else. At home, Draco tried to stay as unobtrusive as possible. It wasn't that his home life was bad, per se. He got everything he asked for and was free to speak his mind. If Draco wanted something known, he needed little more than to say it. But there were rules to navigating life in the Malfoy manor that those peons at Hogwarts just didn't understand. Most importantly, Lucius Malfoy was a busy, busy man. The stresses of whatever business he was up to weighed on him 1,000 times over, and that stress had only multiplied since Draco's father first received a certain phone call 1 year ago. The Port Mafia. Every time Draco asked, "What's going on?" or "How can I help?" he was met with nothing more than a sharp look. The words, "Go back to your room. This doesn't concern you." We're all too familiar now. But a Malfoy didn't give up, and they didn't back down. The second Draco entered Hogwarts, he investigated anyway. He had hunted down his only lead, a student by the name of Dazai Osamu, and hung around the boy all year long. His father would appreciate the effort, Draco was sure. He was sure. Then there was the Philosopher's Stone, which Draco had given back to Dazai without even consulting his father. And then there was Dazai, whom Draco had pledged loyalty to with only a second thought to the Malfoy name. He was sure he couldn't tell his father any of this. Draco was trying not to feel too guilty about it. But silently stewing over the Port Mafia's ambassador over the last 2 weeks only made Draco more desperate. Deep in thought, Draco was only distantly aware of the gang's office clearing out. Dazai dismissed the others to dinner, saying a friendly "see you later" to Blaze in particular. Draco had to jumpstart himself to follow them out, brains still buzzing with worrisome thoughts. Loyal to Dazai, loyal to his father. Draco was sure it wasn't supposed to be both. They weren't really in business yet, they were competing. Before he made it to the door, however, a voice stopped him short. "Draco, a word?" Dazai was staring at him, smile pleasant in the way a Slytherin could smile when they wanted something from you. Draco matched the smile reflexively. "If I'm seen enjoying your company," Draco's mind silently tightened the bind around his throat, "I'll be dragging my father's name through the mud." "Sure," Draco said. He watched as Blaze gave them a final glance before shutting the door. Alone with just Draco and Dazai, the gang room suddenly felt very cold. A Slytherin thrived in the cold depths of dungeons. Unless you were Dazai, Draco thought fondly. Then you were constantly whining about the temperature. "Since you're so insistent on avoiding me, it's awfully difficult to get you alone," Dazai said, leaning back against the desk. His fingers wrapped along the wood, the thoughtful movement looking intentional. "To think you were the one who wanted to talk with me." Draco recalled their conversation in flourish and blots. 1,000 questions were still buzzing in his skull just thinking about it. "What is the Port Mafia? How are you involved in something like that? What do you want with my family? You know why I can't have you hanging over my shoulders right now, Dazai," he said instead. The mafioso shrugged, amused smile flitting across his face. "Bad press," he inferred, fingers tapping out a beat. Bad press for Dazai would mean bad press for Draco would mean bad press for the Malfoy family. Would mean Draco couldn't do that to his father. Had been told under no uncertain terms not to do that to his father. Dazai seemed to understand. Being in the Mafia, maybe he did. "Well, we're alone now. Whatever questions you have, ask them," he said, to the point. "Should you be this loose with information?" Draco asked, thinking of his father's own tight lips. He didn't give Dazai a chance to think it over, though. He didn't think he could handle it if Dazai changed his mind and kept the truth to himself. Bursting frantically from Draco's lips came a thought that had been bothering him for weeks now. You're in the Mafia? Ah, Dazai chuckled. Turd it is. Yes, I'm in the Port Mafia. That's absurd. You realize that's absurd, right? You're 12. So are you. Dazai's ring finger tapped once, twice, thrice before stilling completely. His hands fell to his sides. On I have the Mafia. You have Lucius. Draco frowned. That's not the same thing at all. Dazai lifted a brow, but didn't comment. Draco felt his heart murmur. What does the Port Mafia want from my father? He asked, starting with the most important question. What do you want with my father? I didn't lie, in Diagon Alley. Dazai's brow fell, rendering his expression one of boredom. Lucius is powerful and wealthy. He's a good connection to have. Draco took a breath. That made sense. Everyone wanted to be friends with the Malfoys. But Draco couldn't find it in him to puff up with pride right now. This conversation had been weighing on him for weeks now. He just wanted concrete answers. Once Draco understood, his father would gladly accept his help. But why you? Why not your boss or an adult? The Port Mafia is too busy to send executives for every meet and greet. Yokohama comes first, the Malfoys come second. There was something Dazai wasn't saying. Something Draco couldn't name. Something bigger than. A chill suddenly ran up his spine as realization set in. Boss, executives, ambassadors. This was big. This was really big. This wasn't one magical group schmoozing with the Malfoys for a favor or two. It wasn't a group of friends laughing over pranks and schemes. Wasn't Dazai asking, heads or tails? Like he already knew which way the coin had landed before it even spun twice. It was an organization, a city. More than just social niceties, Draco thought. The usual Malfoy politics were superficial. This was decidedly not. Yokohama is a big place, Dazai said. Firelight turned his eyes a murky red. When a magical community is even bigger, the Port Mafia is just sniffing around. You can tell Lucius that. Draco blinked, suddenly torn from his thoughts. I wasn't going to tell my father any of this. You were. It's fine. Dazai knocked against the side of the desk again. It rattled hollow. Sai would do the same. We're alike in that way. And my father isn't my boss, Draco countered, the comparison rankling in his mind. He tried to force some of his usual condescension in his voice, but it was difficult. With Dazai, simple things had a way of complicating like that. And it's weird that you have one. Dazai waved him off. Did you have any other questions? Or did you just want to verify that the Port Mafia exists? Somehow it felt like Dazai hadn't answered any of his concerns at all. Draco's irritation was swamped out by the overwhelming feeling of being well out of his depth. But I can handle it, father. I can help. He shook his head. Last year, with Professor Quirrell, did your boss tell you to? The words caught on his tongue. To kill him? Draco nodded, finding it suddenly a challenge to hold Dazai's gaze. No, Draco blinked. No? That's just how things worked out. But that's all turned into such a hassle. I should have J-Suit let Quirrell kill me instead of fighting back. Dazai paused, eyes flicking briefly to the side. Did Lucius say anything to you about Quirrell? This does not concern you, his father had said. There is nothing for you to do, followed by a series of private meetings Draco had pretended not to eavesdrop on. Draco wouldn't ask again, just what had happened to lead to Quirrell's death. Summer was long and full of unasked questions like that. The long, empty halls of Malfoy Manor had no answers to give. Draco had no answer to give either. Father stewed, and Mother fretted, and Draco watched from his room. Not to me, he responded, only after a few seconds had passed. About Voldemort? No. Or anything about his test for me? Draco's hands turned to fists. No. Dazai hummed. Then he pushed off the desk and stalked across the room to the door. Bosses are the worst like that, he said, a pointed grin splitting across his face. Draco wondered what kind of expression that was. Never telling you anything, even when you're smack dab in the middle of everything. Draco jumped in surprise. Oh, or boss doesn't tell you anything either? Dazai tittered with a tight-sounding laugh. He tells me more than Lucius tells you, evidently. When Draco's frown fell way into a scowl, Dazai amended, "Don't worry, though. I'll be a good boss to you. Hell's hounds don't benefit from keeping secrets like that." Before he could stop himself, Draco asked, "Does Blaze know about the Port Mafia?" Dazai froze. Whatever humor was on his face hardened and turned brittle. Then, in the blink of an eye, it was gone. "He's your best friend," Draco continued. "And he doesn't know." Another pause. Light caught on the stained glass window, shattering blues and reds across the floor. One of those crimson hues flashed in Dazai's eyes. Dangerous. "Cha, Draco is being really mean today," Dazai whined. Then, "We're all friends, but this thing between the Port Mafia and the Malfoys is bigger than some silly friendship." Dazai's voice was very suddenly flat, sounding rehearsed. "On some things. Most things are more important than honesty. Just read the Daily Prophet and you'll see what I mean." Draco stood stock still, eyes staring at Dazai's, watching. It felt like suddenly he was looking at a total stranger. That uncanny feeling tightened a band around his chest. Why did Dazai sound so cold? As though he'd already seen the worst humanity had to offer, and was merely imparting pebbles of that knowledge onto Draco now. All this mafia business should just be kept between us. Dazai smiled thinly. Something about that expression seemed to be a lie, and Draco's unease only grew. "I think we should leave the others out of it. But since you're a Malfoy, I don't need to keep anything like that a secret from you. I can trust Draco to help me out with Lucius's test. Right? You want our bosses to be happy." The more Draco heard from Dazai, the more of a stranger the other boy seemed. "Right," Draco said, voice sounding weaker than he'd wanted. A second passed. Dazai's severe tone became mirthful. Like flipping a switch, Draco thought. He tasted bile on his tongue. "I'm glad. We'll make a good team, I can tell." Dazai tittered, and Draco nearly did a double take at the other boy's abrupt laughter. "Ah, but Draco! We're going to miss dinner if we lollygag anymore. Blaze will yell at me if I don't eat today. Do I even know you at all?" Draco's heart skipped a beat. "Does anyone? Are you coming to dinner, Draco?" Dazai asked smiley. "Since we're such good friends, I promise to sit really far away from you." Maybe his father was right, and Draco had no business trying to help. The more Dazai talked, the more Draco realized just how out of his depth he really was. The more a waxing fear began to curdle in his gut. But here Dazai was, extending a hand to him and saying things like, "I trust you to help me." Father had told him not to get involved, had said he wouldn't be able to do anything. Dazai was asking to stand by his side and figure it out anyway. Even at kind words like that, the guilty feeling in Draco's chest didn't abate. It wriggled and roiled. All this talk of tests and loyalties only left him feeling sick. It was different, being on this side of the test. Draco was used to being the one forcing others to prove themselves to him. Was this how Dazai had felt last year? If Dazai recognized that discomfort in him now, he didn't comment. Like it meant nothing at all. Being caught between father and friend. Talking about father's test as if it were just an everyday occurrence for him. Draco frowned. Given what little he knew about the Port Mafia. Maybe it was. "The Port Mafia is a scary place," Draco mumbled with a sigh. He walked to Dazai's side and opened the door. "What was that?" "Nothing." Draco shook his head. If they were really friends, then why did talking with Dazai about this feel like a betrayal against his father? Draco wished money could solve this particular problem. But all the galleons in his pockets only made the weight on his chest feel heavier. 8. The villain. A long black tail smacked against the floor. The tile resounded with a boom at the force. "You aren't doing it right," Draco said. "And all." Ron shot him a glare. "Then give better instructions." For the 10th time in the last hour, Ron held out his hand to Egg. Instead of gently resting her snout on his palm as Draco had demonstrated, the Norwegian Ridgeback merely eyed Ron. Her tail whapped against the floor again. When she puffed out a breath, a plume of smoke came with it. "You're annoying her. You're annoying me." Slam. Ron and Draco both jumped, quibbling coming to a dead stop immediately. At the desk, Hermione slammed her book shut and turned to face them with a severe look. "Can't you two just get along already? I'm trying to read here." Draco scowled. You're reading my book, Gryffindor. At least be grateful. I'm trying to read your book. She sniffed. It's only just impossible with all your bickering in the background. A study of draconic creatures sat on the desk, protected by Hermione's hovering hands. The text was positively ancient, pages yellowing and spine broken. To be written by the famed wizard Merlin, it would have to be. But, despite having been dated hundreds of years earlier, the book was well cared for. Ron could rant day and night about how evil the Malfoy family was, but it was undeniable they took good care of their books. Hermione had read through about a quarter of it already, slowed down by Merlin's dense, outdated vocabulary and the sound of quarreling children. She wished, privately, that she had the same kind of command Dazai seemed to wield effortlessly. He'd clap his hands and silence a crowd, say one word and receive 1,000 eager answers. Hermione didn't have that kind of charisma. What she had was her books, and the books had her. Right now, she had Draco's book. It says in Chapter 4 that dragons are very receptive to the emotions of those around them, she recited. Perhaps Egg doesn't respect you because of all your yelling. Anger isn't something worth respecting. What about condescension, then? Ron asked, snappish. The two of you seem to have that in bounds. Hermione sighed. Prawn, just try calming down a bit. When Draco snorted, she turned to him. And Draco, quit provoking Ron. We'll never finish this up if you're always bullying him. Draco sneered, a biting remark poised on his tongue. But then, to Hermione's surprise, Draco's didn't bark back. Instead, his shoulders fell and he looked away, silent. She blinked. That was an odd reaction for the usually high and mighty Malfoy. Beside him, Ron held out his hand again. He waited, palm up, waited and waited. That Merlin bloke didn't know what he was talking about. This isn't working at all. Hermione rested her hand on a study of draconic creatures, offended on the book's behalf. Then, once again to Hermione's shock, Draco jumped to the book's defense before she could, and a great Merlin knew all there was to know about dragons. My father wouldn't have given me a worthless book. Maybe you're just too stupid to read it yourself. What kind of insult is that coming from a Malfoy? Don't you just buy all of your grades? I get my grades by being smart, which is more than anyone can say for you. You, boys, Hermione commanded again. Only without the slamming of a book to punctuate her voice, it had little impact. Ron and Draco continued to snap back and forth at one another. It was clear they weren't going to be stopping anytime soon. Once again, Hermione wished she had the skill to channel Dazai. Seeming to sense it was pointless, Egg let out another smoky breath before flapping her wings. She silently retreated to her nest of pillows. With all of their bickering, Ron and Draco didn't seem to have even noticed. Hermione sighed. She cast a longing glance to Merlin's book, but there was no way she could focus with all the, I don't even know why Dazai lets you be here. Speak for yourself. Hermione pinched the bridge of her brow. Don't really, you two. Ron crossed his arms, defensive. This is pointless anyway. Let's just tell everyone we're buddy-buddy now and be done with it. Gladly, Draco sniffed, turning his chin up. With one hand braced against the floor, he pushed himself to his feet. Ron followed not a second after, looking annoyed with himself for not being the one to storm off first. I'd rather be practicing for Quidditch tryouts than wasting my time here with you. They're only a few days away, and I'd like to work in a few extra practices first. Ron stopped halfway to a biting remark. Surprise lit his eyes, followed quickly by anger. You're trying out for the Slytherin team? Draco paused. A second later, realization lit his face. Don't tell me you're trying for Gryffindor. Quidditch doesn't need another Weasley. You're just afraid to lose to 3 Weasleys at once. So confident you'll make the team? Draco raised a brow, sounding amused. He looked Ron up and down. I wouldn't be... Well, at least I'm not just planning to buy my spot on the team. I'll have you know, slam. Again, they both jumped, startling to face Hermione at the desk. She had slammed the book again, taking the extra effort to pick it up and throw it down. That seemed to be the only way to get everyone's attention. Hermione patted the book in silent thanks for its service. Books had many, many uses after all. Neither of you are going to make the Quidditch teams like this, she told them with a pointed look each. Quidditch is all about teamwork. You two can't go even a second without your wand hands getting twitchy. Draco shook his head, annoyance flashing in his eyes. That isn't the same thing. It is. She leveled him with a glare. And Hermione blinked, looking from Ron to Draco once again. It looked like a fire had been lit under them. That was something she could work with, because wealth and blood feuds were a little out of her wheelhouse. But Quidditch? She could work with that. And I'm going to prove it to you. Ron snorted. What do you know about teamwork, Hermione? Reading isn't exactly a two-man sport. Maybe, but I've read dozens of books on Quidditch. By the end of the week, I'll have you two working so well together, people will think you've played Quidditch side by side for years. Having set her course, Hermione got to her feet. She grabbed a study of draconic creatures and held it at her chest. The boys blinked, confused by her sudden shift. She started across the room. Where are you going? Not up to the job, Gryffindor? Hermione sniffed. Suddenly, she whirled on her heels to face them. Working in here is only stressing Egg and me out. I have a better idea. She punctuated her next sentence with a pointed finger their way. Grab your flying brooms. We're practicing Quidditch. Together, as one team. Draco and Ron gaped. From her nest, Egg seemed to snicker. Oh, you can't be serious. Draco deadpanned. I'll knock him right off his broom if he even looks at me. Well, this would either be a gang-saving miracle or a catastrophic disaster. Either way, Hermione thought. It was better than sitting cooped up in this room all week. She couldn't take even one more minute of their bickering. It was only Tuesday, and her ears were already ringing from it. For Dazai, classes tended to blend together. After all, he was barely permitted to participate in most of them. Lately, he'd at least tried to find some entertainment in using his newfound magical sensitivity, feeling out the nuances in different spells, or trying to sense them from across the room. But all that had learned Dazai was that every transfiguration spell was annoyingly identical, and that Neville was really bad at charms. The only class that was unchanged from the previous year was History of Magic. And, well, if Dazai slept through that class, it wouldn't make any difference. He had slept through it multiple times. Dazai didn't think Professor Binns had even noticed. Actually, scratch that. Professor Binns was barely cognizant of anyone in his class. Dazai didn't think the ghostly professor was still entirely present. The only exception to this rule was, without a doubt, defense against the dark arts, though not for a lack of trying. The class itself was a complete bore. They spent more time talking about Lockhart's hair care routine than they did defensive spells. Everything about the class had Dazai rolling his eyes and sharing exasperated looks with Blaise. What made defense against the dark arts different wasn't the lessons. No, it was how Lockhart was constantly calling on Dazai, poking fun at him and turning the class against him. Case in point. Dazai will read the next passage, Lockhart announced, turning his full attention onto the mafioso. Amusement danced in his eyes. I'm sure you'll find that this rambling Warwick character fits you quite well. Not very smart, but plenty conniving. If you would just read his lines for us now. Dazai raised a brow. He made a show of looking down at his empty desk. You know I didn't bring my book, Professor. Still intent on wasting your classmates' time? Lockhart tutted. So I could say the same to you. A few tittering laughs filled the room at that. But, seeing as it was the demon student who told the joke, the laughter died off quickly. An awkward silence took its place. Lockhart sighed, sounding deeply aggrieved. It may have convinced Dazai, if not for the professor's expectant and obnoxious tone. Now, no need to lash out. Dazai rolled his eyes. Come on up to the front of the room. I'll let you read from my book. Then, as an aside to the rest of the class, he added, I know. Aren't I generous? The students were silent in response. Dazai lifted his chin to peer around Blaise's stack of books. He met Lockhart's gaze head-on. Aren't you worried, letting me so close to you? He asked, unimpressed with Lockhart's condescending grin. I mean, I could stab you. Blaise elbowed him under the table. I won't stab you, Dazai amended, clearly as an afterthought. But you shouldn't want to risk it. Silence. Lockhart stared at him, eyes wide. For a second he didn't say anything. Then he cleared his throat. Yes, well, you are something of a brute. I suppose a demon can't peacefully take instruction. He shuffled in place, obviously nervous. Dazai smirked, not even bothering to hide his amusement. Seeing this, Lockhart's ever-present smile briefly fell into a scowl. Write that down, class. A demon can't do anything without resorting to violence. This will be on the test next week. At the front of the room, Hermione hastily wrote in her notes. Dazai slumped forward into his palm. Well, Lockhart continued. Since our demon won't read this passage, I suppose I'll have to assign it as homework. So sorry, everyone. I really try my best for you all, but some people just can't be reasoned with. Complaints rose up around the room. Only a few familiar faces remained quiet. Dazai spotted Draco, Ron, and Hermione among them. Pansy protested the loudest. They'll get over themselves, Blaise said to him under his breath. Dazai shrugged. It doesn't matter. I don't need anyone here to like me. But it would be nice to be liked, wouldn't it? Blaise asked. He didn't seem to be expecting an answer when he continued. Anyway, I don't think you should keep antagonizing everyone like this. You could get hurt. Dazai rolled his shoulders, stooping into himself. Sure enough, more than half the students present had turned in their seats to glare daggers at him. Lockhart, although he was now keeping his focus steadfastly elsewhere, looked pleased with how the situation had turned out. No one in this school, staff or student, was blind to how Dazai was widely regarded. He only had the Daily Prophet to thank for that. Can't be helped, Dazai grumbled into his palm. Blaise paused to consider that for a second. Then, he sighed. I don't like the thought of you getting hurt. He glanced to Lockhart, then back to his desk. The notes in front of Blaise were mostly neat and rigid, but sketchy doodles of owls lined the edges, courtesy of Dazai's wandering quill. Are we meeting in the Hound's office after class? Dazai shook his head. Alma's going to head to the library. He wouldn't be able to sneak into the restricted section in the middle of the day, but Dazai still didn't think books on the sensing stone would be that difficult to find before lunch. But you're welcome to check on Draco, Ron, and Hermione if you want. They should be there. That's all for today, class. Dazai and Blaise looked up to see Lockhart, waving his students off. He sorted a stack of papers on his desk and looked inordinately pleased with himself when Neville bid him a good afternoon. Across the room, Ron, Hermione, and Draco silently gravitated towards one another. They very carefully didn't meet one another's eyes. Dazai and Blaise watched them walk out together, looking more like a group of strangers than friends. See? There they go, Dazai said, listless. Blaise sighed as he stood. I'll catch up with them. Tell Draco I say hi. With the other boys still avoiding him, Dazai had been unable to do so himself since their gang meeting the other day. The others were significantly easier to snag a word with. Sure, Blaise said. He watched, wordless, as Dazai rose to his feet as well. Dazai raised a questioning brow, but Blaise only shook his head. Good luck with your research. Dazai slung his book bag over his shoulder. Thanks. Try not to let those three hurt one another too badly. Blaise merely shrugged, as though the idea hadn't even occurred to him. They'll be fine, Dazai agreed. They needed a good shove in the right direction, but he knew they would make a fine trio someday. After all, he had seen firsthand Draco and Ron working together before. In the meantime, Hermione and Blaise would help to keep things peaceable. With a quick farewell, Blaise left. Dazai watched him turn out of the room in the same direction those three took earlier. When Dazai looked back to the classroom, he found it empty save for himself and Lockhart. Just my luck. Lockhart took a long, swinging step forward and opened his mouth to speak. Do we have to talk? Dazai asked before Lockhart could even get one word in. He made a show of readjusting his bag. Lockhart tutted, but didn't come any closer. It almost looked like, to Dazai's perceptive eye, the man was half cowering behind a desk. The confident charm on his lips wasn't nearly as convincing, given this. No need to be so hostile. I merely wanted to thank you for your performance. Dazai frowned. That bit about stabbing me? Genius. Lockhart laughed. That will be a great line for my book. The demon student threatened my life. The entire class of innocent little children huddling behind me for safety. Dazai couldn't help it. He rolled his eyes. Everything about Lockhart was cartoonish. Here he was, hiding behind a desk while professing his own heroics. Dazai laughed, dry and bitter. And if you say so, I was only being honest. Lockhart's golden smile wavered for just a second. He recovered quickly. Now, as for next class, I have a few pointers. If, perhaps, you could direct some of these threats to your classmates. A true villain targets the weak, not the strong, myself, I mean. And really, you do threaten me quite a lot. It's getting a little stale now. You just want to jump to someone's rescue. Lockhart's laugh echoed. Everyone appreciates having a hero come to their aid, especially by a hero so handsome. Others, Dazai countered deadpan, prefer to be left alone. Exactly, Lockhart clapped. Why don't you pick on one of the quieter students? Ah, Mr. Longbottom is awfully jumpy. He would make a perfect damsel in distress for me to rescue. Dazai hummed. He took a step towards the exit. When Lockhart made no move to stop him, Dazai braced a hand against the door. I wouldn't make a good villain if I just did everything the hero asked of me, he said. Though Dazai's voice was baked in amusement, he was anything but. Lockhart was slimy and obnoxious. Unlike Mori, however, he didn't hide behind sinister lies or manipulative comments. No, Lockhart was blunt and to the point. If Lockhart wanted Dazai to act like the villain to his hero, he would simply say as much. Dazai was less than impressed. Unfortunately, just trying to ignore the persistent man didn't seem to be yielding any results for Dazai, and threatening Lockhart with bodily harm only stood to write Lockhart's book for him. Dazai's biggest enemy to date was an imbecilic narcissist. It was like talking to a wall. Lockhart sighed, sounding just as aggrieved as Dazai silently felt. He took a waltzing step forward, but held a chair out in front of him as if for protection. Come now. Imagine the papers, the headlines. You'd be right on the first page beside me, of course. Every child your age dreams of celebrity status. I'm already on the front page of every paper. Unfortunately. And the word celebrity didn't really apply to Dazai so much as enemy of the people did. And what are you doing with it? Making yourself a ghost amongst your peers. Lockhart's expression was pitying. My advice? Do an interview. Sign some autographs. A lot of kids these days find the bad boy type attractive. I don't care. Chino, I know, he snapped. I'll set some interviews up for you. As long as you drop my name once or twice, of course. Gilderoy Lockhart is my greatest competition, always foiling my evil schemes. Something like that would do nicely. Dazai kicked the door all the way open. He couldn't take much more of this. Lockhart was grating in a way few people could manage. At least when Coil cornered him, the man wouldn't look so satisfied with himself about it. Dazai turned on his heel. Okay. If I don't leave now, I really will stab you. Wait, Dazai barely spared the professor a glance. Shen wrote you a script, hold on. Lockhart floundered. The sound of scattering papers and fallen quills echoed whatever the man was doing. Dazai finally relented, turning to see Lockhart bent over his desk, tossing papers around in search of... Here it is. He waved a thick stack of papers around in one hand. It must have been dozens of pages long. A nice long villain's monologue. I thought your dialogue has been a bit lacking. Read this out during dinner today, will you? Dazai blinked. Lockhart couldn't be serious. He couldn't be. He absolutely was that serious. You're an idiot, Dazai said, genuine. Finally finding some ounce of courage, Lockhart beckoned Dazai to him. Dazai hesitated for only a second. The thought of simply turning to leave now was strong, but the calling urge to burn Lockhart's script in front of him was stronger. Dazai held his hand out. Lockhart dropped the stack of pages into his palm, looking impressed with himself. Up close, the script was even more repulsive somehow. Line after line about Dazai's supposed evil plans, some made-up tragic backstory, various threats to a certain handsome and incredible champion of the people. Dazai almost threw up in his mouth. He flipped a page, letting the disgust show on his face. It says make a villainous sneer, not make a face like you're going to be sick, Lockhart. Chided. Dazai frowned. Then, he did just that. A villainous sneer. Dazai was no stranger to those. He gave Lockhart the most sadistic leer he could manage, and it was plenty villainous. After all, he'd copied it from some of Port Mafia's best torturers. Venom oozed off him, dripping from the shadows of his eyes, the curl of his lips. Dazai's eyes looked blood red in shadow. a smile curved like a crescent moon. Looking at him, it was impossible to mistake him as a harmless 12-year-old. He was a killer all the way through his blood. Lockhart squeaked. It was all very satisfying. With a quiet chuckle, Dazai turned back to the script. He held the papers slack in his hands, deciding what to do with them while Lockhart boasted to himself. Burning them did sound fun, but Dazai still couldn't cast incendio reliably. Maybe a candle. Dazai glanced to Lockhart's desk. It was a mess of papers and books, but aside from the chandeliers dangling overhead, bore no sign of fire. Dazai was just contemplating shoving the script down Lockhart's too big mouth, when something else caught his attention. Lockhart followed his gaze. "Ah, no cheating now." He grabbed a paper off the desk. It was marked over in black and red. Written across the top, the paper read, "Dada test answer key. Although I appreciate the thought, let's not go off script, okay? Here," he tapped a finger against the monologue. "Practice this. Then we can consider maybe letting you cheat on a test or two. I suppose stopping a cheating scandal doesn't have the same ring to it as stopping a homicidal demon, but it might add some flavor in the middle chapters." Lockhart turned away, mumbling to himself. Dazai's eyes flashed to the test key once more before he finally backed away and left the room. Lockhart could plot his book on his own time. Anyway, Dazai had no desire to listen to the professor's attempt at scripting out all of their interactions any further, and after I defeat you in Chapter 7... Hey, where are you going? I haven't told you off yet about skipping our detention last weekend. Dazai slammed the door at his back. Good riddance. Luckily, by the time Dazai finally managed to squirm out of Lockhart's room, the hallway was completely empty. The other students must have been either hanging around their common rooms or on their way to lunch by now. Dazai sighed and shoved the script harshly into his robe's inner pocket. He had wanted to do some research, but that conversation with Lockhart had put him in too foul a mood. It was too difficult to focus with such a negative mood clouding over his thoughts. Lockhart was just too awful, making no efforts to mask his desire to control Dazai's every action. Maybe Dazai should hunt down the twins instead. They always knew how to cheer him up. Thinking this, Dazai turned a corner in the direction of the Gryffindor common rooms. Or, what he thought was the right direction. After about 5 minutes of wandering, it became abruptly clear that Dazai had taken a wrong turn somewhere. The halls of Hogwarts stretched on before him, unfamiliar and familiar at the same time. Illogical. Dazai looked around for a painting. In the past, they had helped him to find his way. Hopefully now would be no different. But after another minute of searching, only blank walls answered his search. Slumping forward, Dazai considered just giving up. What an awful place to die in, he grumbled. And it'll be days before starvation sets in too. What are you talking about? Dazai blinked out of his thoughts, perking up. Someone else was here. Even if they hated him, they would give him instructions on how to get to the Gryffindor common rooms. Fear was a great motivator like that. Except, snooping around in random corridors, you must be up to no good. Pansy sneered. Figures. First Lockhart, now Pansy. Today was cursed from the start. I'm lost, Dazai said, smiling. We're friends, Pansy. You remember how I always get lost? Ugh. She made a face. We were never friends. Don't even say something like that. Dazai opened his mouth to make some bullying remark, when suddenly, a body of students came around the corner and swarmed around Pansy's shoulders. There must have been a dozen of them. Apprehension immediately shivered up Dazai's spine. Dazai recognized some of them, Crabbe and Coil for one. He also spotted the 2 students who ran into him on the train among the group, Millicent and Tracy. Dazai frowned upon realizing that the mob of people surrounding Pansy ranged from 1st years to 7th years, and they wore colors from every house. The only thing the group all had in common were their matching looks of scathing hatred. It was pointed directly at Dazai. Dazai stood straight, shoulders snapping into a stiff line. Trepidation filled his chest. This doesn't look good. Pansy scoffed. Drop the act, Dazai. I knew you were bad news from the very beginning. Now that everyone else has finally opened their eyes to your nonsense, I can do something about it. Dazai's eyes flicked to the mob again. A 5th-year student Dazai vaguely recognized gripped their wand in their hand, poised to strike. Look at that. Pansy started her own anti-Dazai club. It's no loyalty club, but I suppose. Shut up. I don't want to play your games. Dazai's mouth snapped shut. He sobered his grinning expression, giving Pansy a dull look instead. What remained of Dazai's playful demeanor withered entirely. Then what do you want, Pansy? He asked, locking eyes with the other Slytherin. I'm busy. I don't have time to play politics with you. She scowled, fingers flexing around the wand at her side. I want you to stop soiling the Slytherin name. I want you to stop soiling Blaze's name. I want you to drop out. As long as you aren't here, that's what I want. Around her, the mob roared with agreement. Though only the Slytherins seemed to agree with the first half, the overall message was met with raucous encouragement. Cries of "murderer" and "demon" echoed Pansy's tirade. As they jeered, the crowd began to spread out. They formed a wall behind Pansy. No escape. Dazai stared at Pansy alone. His entire body was a careful mask, telling neither of fear nor concern over the situation. Pansy's mob wasn't here just to talk, that much was obvious. The way they gripped their wands and squared their shoulders told Dazai they were going to make sure their message stuck. There's been a slight misunderstanding, Dazai appeased. He held his hands out, non-threatening. I'm not doing anything to damage this school or anyone in it. I'll just be on my way. Except when Dazai took a step back, he immediately bumped into something solid. He jumped, then spun to face whatever he'd run into. At some point during the conversation, Crabbe and Coil must have walked around him. Now, the two Slytherins towered over Dazai's shoulders, caging him in. Ah. Suddenly, Coil reached out to grab him. Dazai reacted quicker, pinching Coil's index finger from the air and twisting it back. Coil shouted and tried to pull away, but Dazai was fast and dangerous. The finger groaned under him. It bent back obscenely, and something yanked Dazai back before he could break the finger. Crabbe wore a brutish scowl on his face when, abruptly, he clapped a meaty palm down on Dazai's shoulders. He squeezed, trapping Dazai in place. Dazai gave a testing shove, but was unable to shake Crabbe off of him. Meanwhile, Coil drew away with a pained yelp, clutching his hand to his chest and wearing a hurt expression. Something rankled in his gut. Between Crabbe's hand, Coil's cracking knuckles, and Pansy's wand-wielding gang behind him, Dazai was well and truly caged. This is a bit much, isn't it? Dazai asked, eyeing Crabbe, then Pansy. Oh, you killed a teacher. You have no right to talk about doing too much. Pansy countered. When she stepped forward, the mob behind her did as well. Dazai's cage shuddered smaller. You were already a pest when you were just bumbling around at Draco's back, but I guess having no respect for Hogwarts traditions wasn't enough for you, huh? Killing a professor. Someone like that shouldn't be here. How long will it be before you decide you want another professor dead? Or a student? One of us? Dazai blinked. It almost seemed as though Pansy was talking more to her gang than she was to him, now. Behind Pansy, the crowd made sounds of unsteady agreement, but now that he was looking closer, Dazai realized hatred wasn't the only thing riling them up. No, shoulders hiked to their ears, palms sweaty around wands, eyes darting from Dazai to Pansy almost frantically. Fear, Mori's voice echoed in his ear. They were afraid of him. It didn't come as a surprise, really. The Daily Prophet had nothing but horrifying things to say about Dazai. He was a demon, a mindless killer, a follower of the dark arts. It was hardly true, of course, but the Daily Prophet had sway over the entire magical community, and Dazai was the only voice arguing against it. The Daily Prophet wanted people to fear him, and fear made people do dangerous things. But Pansy wasn't afraid. Her eyes were scathing, burning flames. Her wand hand was steady, and her words were condemning. When Pansy leveled him with a glare and said, "Get out of my school," she meant it with the strongest of convictions. Her hatred of him was bone deep. There was nothing superficial about it, and nothing fearful about it. Pansy, Dazai's eyes narrowed. Wouldn't you know I have no intentions of doing something like that? She scoffed. The crowd similarly looked unconvinced. I didn't think you would kill Professor Quirrell, yet here we are. Neither did I, Dazai grumbled, mostly to himself. The Daily Prophet doesn't know what it's talking about. I know you remember that whole Quirrell situation playing out differently than how the papers reported it. And you know half the things that happen in Hogwarts don't ever hit the mainstream media. The crowd looked to one another, as if trying to parse out Dazai's words. Pansy, however, merely scowled. He knew what she was thinking. The mountain troll Dazai killed last year, the monster that got loose in the Slytherin common rooms, their secret loyalty club room, all things that had gone entirely unreported on. How could the Daily Prophet's stories be trusted if they were only ever getting a fraction of the truth? Pansy shook her head, frown deepening. Oh, I know you're up to something. You've been scheming since the very start. Dazai twitched at the accusation. Krabba must have felt it, because a second later the hand on Dazai's shoulder gave him a rough shove. He tried not to squirm under the hold. Pansy watched him, hatred simmering in her every motion. Her wand was still held tightly at her side. Good. Dazai needed to keep it that way. He could handle being berated, could even handle a punch or two. But Dazai didn't know what he would do if no longer human was revealed in front of all these strangers. They already thought he was a demon. Finding out he had a dangerous ability up his sleeves would only rile the Daily Prophet up more. While Pansy's wand was kept in check, however, the mob behind her was not. Their anger was twitchy with panic. Wands shifted from one hand to the other, ready to lash out at any moment. Taking a deep breath, Dazai hunched his shoulders. He tried to make himself look smaller, less threatening. Only a few of the students untensed. They would need more reassuring then. I'm not planning anything. No one is going to get hurt, Dazai soothed, speaking directly to the crowd just as Pansy had done moments earlier. They stared at him with wide, disbelieving eyes. Shifting gears, he asked, "Didn't Pansy rally you all up and ask you to come here?" No one responded, but Dazai saw them shifting in place and shooting one another glances. "Pansy has misled you," Dazai told them. "The Daily Prophet has misled you." The grip on his shoulder tightened. "Everyone knows that you're a threat to Hogwarts, to everything Hogwarts stands for," Pansy growled. Then she whirled on her followers, who startled to attention. "Only the bravest students agreed to come with me today. Everyone else was so scared you would hurt them for speaking against you. Do you know how many people are terrified of you? I don't care what the Daily Prophet says or doesn't say. No one feels safe with a killer here. We're right. Sai can't sleep with him in the same room as me. Any one of us could be next." The crowd roared with agreement. Again, Crab yanked Dazai back to keep him in place. This was getting way out of hand. Dazai needed to put an end to this before either no longer human was revealed or Pansy started a full-scale mutiny against him. Rather than rising to the crowd's level of shouting, Dazai raised a single hand. It silenced them immediately. It was no use trying to mollify the mob. Their fear had blinded them to reasoning. No, he'd strike for its head. Kill the beast at its leading point, and the rest would crumble beneath it. Dazai leveled Pansy with a stabbing stare. "The only flaw in your reasoning, Pansy, is that you aren't afraid of me." Pansy's eyes snapped to him. "Oh, the hell are you talking about? No one wants you out of this school more than me." "Sure." Dazai tried to shrug, but found he could no longer lift his shoulders with how tightly he was being held. "But not because you're afraid of that hoax demon story. In fact, I'd wager that you know I'm not a danger to anyone in Hogwarts. The only one here I'm a threat to is you." Pansy bristled, her hand fisted around her wand, tensing but not rising to strike. "Yet, I'm not afraid of you because I've seen how pathetic at magic you really are. Be honest, Pansy," Dazai sighed. "Aren't you just still jealous that Blaze and Draco like me more than they like you?" "Shut up, bullseye," Dazai thought. Pansy's outraged screech was the only answer Dazai received. For a brief moment, everything was still. Then, Coil raised his fist and swung. Dazai's head snapped to the side. White-hot pain bloomed across his left cheek and he stumbled away from the hit. It was only Crab's hand on his shoulder that kept Dazai from tumbling to the floor. In his mouth, Dazai tasted blood. It took a second for him to regain his bearings, vision swimming from the punch. He blinked several times. Dazai's eyes flashed to Pansy. She was breathing fast, body thundering with each gasp. Her knuckles were white around her wand. What was angry before was now enraged. Slowly, Dazai raised a hand to his cheek. He winced at the sting, but Crab's fist didn't appear to have broken the skin. It would definitely bruise, though. The taste of iron drowned out Dazai's senses from where he'd bit his tongue. He swirled the blood and mucus in his mouth, then spat. Blood splattered out across the tile floor, so deep and dark it was almost black. A ripple of unease rolled through the mob at Pansy's back. "Ow," Dazai grunted. "So if you're going to kill me, make it quick. I don't like pain." Finally, he uprighted himself. Crab tugged him again, and Dazai wobbled into place. When a dribble of blood rolled down his chin, the mafioso smeared it off on the back of his hand. "Oh, and you don't know what you're talking about." Pansy's words were acrid in the air. "You're manipulating Draco and Blaze, just like you're trying to manipulate us now." The other students shifted nervously on their feet. Dazai glanced to them briefly, but turned away when they reeled back in trepidation. Dazai stared Pansy down with half-lidded eyes instead. Most children, Dazai thought, would at this point begin to cry, or beg, or feel at least the slightest hint of panic at what was to come. Would the blows continue? Would the jeers ever stop? Why does everything have to hurt all the time? At this point, a normal child might turn to desperate pleas of forgiveness. Otherwise, they may fall entirely silent, thinking, "If I stop reacting, maybe they'll just leave me alone." But the swell of blood in Dazai's mouth filled him with nothing more than an unbearable exhaustion. Hogwarts wasn't any different than the Port Mafia back home. It was all classless brute force no matter where he went. Father's fist or Coil's. Mori's smile or Lockhart's. "Pansy," Dazai said with a dull voice, "I don't care enough about you to want to manipulate you." Her eyes widened. A tremor of muted conversation rolled through the crowd behind her. Pansy stammered for a second before biting out, "I don't believe you. Anyone with half a brain cell can see you're no good. Since the very start, you've done nothing but make trouble for the people around you. Who cares about any of that?" Crab yanked his shoulder back. Dazai let himself be ragdolled, uncaring. At his other side, Coil grabbed his other arm. The grip was oppressive. Dazai couldn't fight back if he wanted to. "I can't believe Dumbledore even let you back this year." Dazai watched as, slowly, Pansy lifted her wand. It pointed at his chest, as volatile and focused as a gun. The magic in the air burst into action, swirling around the wand's pointed tip. Dazai could feel it even from a distance, a jumble of magical sensation. Shit. Once she formed the spell's cast on her lips, it would all be over. The spell nullified, no longer human revealed. He could kick back and break Coil's knee. That might buy him a second to dodge. Dazai lifted his leg. "This'll teach you to keep to yourself. When in Salazar's name is happening here?" Crab and Coil startled, dropping their holds on Dazai immediately. He stumbled, falling forward on a half-raised foot. The second Dazai was able, he took a step away from them, but the band around his chest didn't loosen. Pansy jumped as well, fumbling with her wand. It clattered noisily on the floor, then rolled several feet away from her. Silence reigned across the gathered crowd as everyone's eyes snapped to far end of the hall. Gemma. The Slytherin prefect and upperclassmen stared the mob down with a severe expression and mouth agape. She radiated a mix of outrage and stupefaction. "Gemma." Pansy jumped, clearly not expecting the prefect to be here. "When we were just having a talk with Dazai, the demon student. You know how awful he is." Gemma stared for a long second before shaking her head. Any surprise on her face was wiped away. Only a cold stare remaining now. Her eyes flicked across the corridor, taking everything in. The more she looked, the darker her expression grew. Dazai wondered what type of scene they all must have made. Pansy's wand thrown aside, a body of angry students at her back while two meatheads stood guard over Dazai's shoulder. The bruise on Dazai's face, the blood on the floor. "This doesn't look like a talk to me," Gemma said as her shoes tap-tap-tapped across the tile floor. She stopped only once she was positioned directly between Dazai and Pansy, evidently having correctly identified them as the primary instigators. "This looks like a duel." She glanced Dazai's way, eyes lingering over Crab and Coil for a second. Something flashed in her eyes, and not a fair one either. "You two," Gemma jerked her head. "Get away from him." Crab and Coil froze. They cast an asking glance to Pansy, before seeming to decide better of it. They ducked around Dazai as fast as their legs would permit. Gemma watched them with a careful eye as they both took shelter at Pansy's shoulders. "Judd," Gemma said, serious. Now, with everyone unable to maim one another any further, she took another second to carefully assess the situation. Thoughtful eyes raked over Pansy, her mob, then Dazai in turn. She lingered over Dazai for a too long second. Whatever she made of his slouching, bruised form, Gemma didn't say. She shook her head and reeled on Pansy a second later. "Oh, and you can all leave. I'll have a word with Dazai, then we'll consider this mess settled." Dazai shrugged himself, fully upright. Pansy seemed to disagree. "You can't be serious," she squawked, snatching her wand from the floor. It was only after a pointed look from Gemma that she returned it to her cloak, rather than pointing it Dazai's way again. "Gemma. I know who he is." Gemma silenced her with a raised hand. "I'll take care of it. You and your group can leave now." "Gemma, shit, Pansy," the prefect said. "Serious. I understand that this situation is very complicated. Because of that, I'm electing to handle this internally, between you, me, Dazai, and your friends here. But if this situation were any less politically charged, and if you take it even one step further, I will not hesitate to bring the staff into this. You understand that, as a prefect, that is my actual prerogative." Pansy drew in a shaking breath, anger just below the surface. She stared at Gemma for a long few seconds before, finally, snapping her head to the side. Gemma's merciful offer was too kind to turn down. "Fine." She bit the word out one letter at a time. "I'll leave." The crowd at her back shifted. Pansy whirled on them. "We're leaving. Can't you people listen?" They jumped, but made quick work of scampering out of Pansy's way after that. Not even a minute passed before the hallway, once crowded and cramped, was empty. Pansy cast a single, parting glare Dazai's way before leaving as well. With only the two of them remaining, Dazai suddenly found he could breathe a little easier. "Are you okay?" Gemma asked suddenly. Dazai stared at her, then offered an intentionally shaky grin. "I'm fine." She didn't look like she believed him. It was no wonder, really. Caged in and defensive had never been a good look on Dazai. Father had once likened him to a feral dog in instances like this. Times where Dazai could do nothing but make do with being held down and hurt. Wearing a sharp look on his face, eyes sunken and spine curled in. Dazai looked the picture of damaged goods just 1 second away from breaking apart entirely. Mori had smiled and said his feral puppy look was actually quite adorable, to which Dazai had promptly responded, "If I have to be your dog, then I'll bite you." Mori's resulting amusement was not at all warranted. Thankfully, Gemma didn't share any of Mori's fawning proclivities. Instead, she merely gave him a quick once-over, then said, "If you're hurt too badly, go to the infirmary." Dazai raised a brow. At the same time, he ran a hand across his robes to smooth out any wrinkles. Crab and Coil hadn't been kind to the fabric. Dazai suspected his rumpled clothes were only making him look more pathetic. Though it might benefit him here for Gemma to continue viewing him as a victim, he would still have to clean up before going to lunch. "If I do that, Madame Pomfrey will find out what happened." He smiled wryly. "Oh, I thought you wanted to keep the staff out of this?" Gemma sighed. "While I would rather not start a whole fuss over this incident," she eyed Dazai. "And I won't stop you." Dazai closed his eyes in thought. They all benefited from keeping quiet about pansies. Attack. If the Daily Prophet caught wind of this, they would only turn the story on its head. Dazai would get more press he didn't want. The Slytherin name would further be trampled through the mud. Hogwarts would have to make a statement, which would inevitably force them to publicly decide if the demon student maybe should be expelled after all. Word would reach Lucius and Mori. If they thought Dazai had lost a duel, their deal might fall through. When Dazai opened his eyes, Gemma was anxiously waiting for an answer one way or the other. "It's nothing a little makeup can't cover," Dazai said after a long moment. Gemma nodded, looking a little relieved at that answer. "I don't know the healing spell, or I'd mend that bruise myself. I'm sorry." She sounded genuinely apologetic. Dazai shook his head. It wouldn't have worked on him anyway. "I'll manage," he said, lightly. Dazai had considered briefly telling Gemma something along the lines of, "It's okay. The pain will remind me not to cause any more trouble," but quickly decided against it. He wasn't sure something like that would be received nearly as well at Hogwarts as it would in Yokohama. Gemma stared at him for a moment, as if trying to read his thoughts. But Dazai took pride in being incomprehensible. she wouldn't find anything. After a second, Gemma seemed to reach the same conclusion and her shoulders dropped in defeat. Dazai took pity on her. You wanted to have a word with me? It couldn't just be to check on his well-being. She didn't need to send Pansy away for something trivial like that. She sighed. I'll get straight to point. Gemma cleared her throat, preparing for what she was going to say next. My job, first and foremost, as a prefect is to take care of the students. Despite what everyone has to say about you being some kind of demon, you're a Slytherin student first. Dazai nodded. He remembered speaking with Gemma last year during the Oops, my pet dragon got loose incident. Keeping the students safe had been her main priority then, as well. So I won't sit idly by when you're being hurt. I'll do my job as a prefect and keep the peace between Pansy. Between everyone and you. She paused. Dazai could feel a but coming. But, she said, if for even 1 second you think about hurting your classmates, it's over. I don't care what the Daily Prophet has to say about you. You really could be a demon for all I care. But keep your claws to yourself. Dazai laughed. And then you'll loose Pansy and her wolves after me? And then I'll have you expelled. Dazai blinked. Gemma was really serious about her job. Lucky for them both, Dazai really had no intentions of harming any of the students here unless backed into a far corner. And despite his threats, he also had no designs of maiming Lockhart, regrettably. Scary, he keened. Then he raised his hands, appeasing. I'll watch my claws. I wasn't planning anything like that anyway. Gemma's eyes briefly flicked to Dazai's gloved hands. For just a second, wariness flashed in her eyes, as though wondering if he really was hiding monstrous claws below the leather. He wasn't, of course. No longer human was far more dangerous. Good, she said haltingly. Let's keep it that way. Except, Lucius's test for the Port Mafia was still an unknown. Somewhere nearby, sometime soon, Dazai would be faced with this test. This show of power. And once those cards fell into place, Dazai would do whatever it took to pass. If that meant hurting a few students here and there, well, Dazai would just have to get his hands dirty. It's scary, Ginny wrote. Below her quill, the diary's paper was fine and soft. It was of high make, not something a Weasley should have been able to afford. She was lucky to find it, tucked away with her other books after returning home from Flourish and Blots. Without Mom here to stand up for me. And my brothers all have their own friends too. I think they like Dazai more than they like me. We're family. Isn't that cruel? It's like I'm all alone here. You have me, Ginny, the diary wrote back, ink black as tar. You won't ever be alone again.
Thank you and subscribe for more Bungo Stray Dogs fanfictions. Let me know what was your favorite scene.